Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association. Our conversation today is the fourth in our Spring 2023 event series produced in collaboration with Rutgers University-Camden and Davidson College. I and the executive team of the BGHRA are delighted to welcome and introduce our very special guests who are all members of the cast and production team of Sam, A SAXON. The groundbreaking HULU series, Sam, A SAXON, is based on the real-life experiences of Sam Meffire. The concept of rekinning, the reunification of our Black German families and diaspora community, is integral to the BGHRA's founding vision. To this end, our burgeoning video archive boasts hundreds of conversations with globally situated persons who identify as Afro-German, Black Germans, and/or Black Europeans, sharing their individual stories and work. Among others, we have hosted multiple generations of artists, activists, poets, musicians, scholars, and filmmakers. We expressly celebrate our diverse family histories and the accomplishments and cultural production of our international community. We are therefore honored and extremely proud that we at the BGHRA are privileged to host today's discussion, which memorializes what we can anticipate will be a watershed moment with respect to Black German filmmaking and the international portrayal of our stories in film and on television. But before we get started, I'd like to ask my BGHRA colleagues to briefly introduce themselves, beginning with Dr. Keith Green, our Rutgers host, and ending with Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, who will then facilitate the remainder of our conversation. Keith? Oh, before that, one more thing. We welcome your questions in the Q&A only. I will greet you again at the end of the program and when I'll share a few details about our upcoming Sam SAXON US tour coming to a university near you in the fall. So stay tuned. Keith?
Thank you, Dr. Pena. As Rose noted, my name is Dr. Keith Green. I'm the Director for Publications at the BGHRA and also Director for Africana Studies at Rutgers University in Camden. I'm so pleased to help host this conversation with the cast and production team of Sam, A SAXON. We are proud to help promote stories of diasporic Blackness that cut across national, linguistic, and cultural boundaries. For too long, Black studies has been imagined as a US-centric enterprise. When it has been articulated within an international framework, the Caribbean, South America, and of course the African continent have often featured prominently, but Europe has been often neglected. We hope that today's conversation with the cast and crew of Sam, A SAXON will contribute to considerable more work that could be done around Black Europe. We want to encourage others to think about this topic as well. Thank you all for joining us. Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath. I'm a visiting assistant professor of German studies at Davidson College, which is a small liberal arts institution just north of Charlotte, North Carolina. And at the BGHRA, I'm the executive director of education initiatives. I'll be back with you in a moment, but first I'll pass the mic to Elizabeth to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Clark-Hosters. I'm part of the executive team of the BGHRA, the director for arts and culture. I also work as an artist and had the immense privilege to play a small part in the production of Sam, A SAXON with friends that feel like family. Yeah, I also am associated with the BGHRA because I feel that for too long, diasporan art has been seen and judged through the eyes of European or Eurocentric people artistic values. And I also feel that the stories that we have to tell, whether we're telling them like in Sam, A SAXON, in film, in acting, or stories told in song, stories told in dance, etc., have been viewed just as something exotic. And I really want to help normalize the fact that our stories maybe don't sound quite like the other stories, and to encourage the next generation to proudly present its own artistic expression. Yeah, so now I'll pass back to Emily.
And I'll pass to Sonia, who just is joining us now. Sonia, can you just introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My apologies for joining you late and in the state. My name is Sonia Donaldson, and I'm an assistant professor of African American Studies at Colby College. I'm actually in Florida right now. I'm doing a digital humanities workshop at the University of Miami. And so I work on communications and archives for the BGHRA, and I'm super excited to be in conversation. I have to apologize because I actually can't stay very long because of the workshop programming that's happening right now. But I've been watching the series, and I have to say that for me, as someone who's not Black German, I was really touched by some of the moments in the series, particularly those moments in which we get to see intimate spaces of people in conversation, particularly Black men in conversation with each other, which I think, is so important. And I really like the way that the series holds the tension, but allows us to see the really sort of real depth of emotion of characters and human beings, right, in this work. So I really appreciate having this opportunity just to say hello. Also, hi, Tyron. I'm Jamaican as well, so I'm also just incredibly proud to be here and to share this space with you. So, hi.
Now that we've met everyone on the team for BGHRA, I'll take just a brief moment to welcome you all again. And especially the students I know who are in the audience, I'm very happy to see you all. I know it's summer break, so it's really great that you're here. All right, so let's take a moment to introduce our guest today, and then we're going to watch a brief trailer of the series. Hopefully everyone's already seen the series and has lots of questions, have lots of questions in mind. And then after that, we'll sort of jump around. We have some questions for the panel, and after that, we'll open things up and to questions from the audience. So anyone, again, if you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A function below. So first, we have Tyron of Panthertainment. He is creator, head writer, showrunner, executive producer, and plays the part of Alex in the series. So welcome. We have Jörg Winger of Big Window. He's also a creator, head writer, showrunner, and executive producer of the series. Soleen Yusef is one of two directors, and she joins us today. Welcome. Malick Bauer, whose birthday it is today, happy birthday again, is the lead actor playing Sam Meffire in the series. Ivy Quainoo, plays Jenny in the series. She's also a star of The Voice Germany and is currently in Germany's version of Hamilton. And so we'll need to leave a little bit early this evening, your evening, our afternoon, to go to the set. And finally, welcome to Chris Zilbar, who is head author as well. So this is our group today. I'm so happy to welcome you all to the BGHRA and to our space. Let's take a moment to watch the trailer. If I started it over, that would probably be a good thing.
Ich wollte unbedingt den Krankenwagen da einholen. Sie wollten mich nicht mitnehmen. Meine Freundin ist kurz vor der Entbindung.
Was ist denn Ihre Bestzeit auf 100 Meter?
10,93.
Schon mal drüber nachgedacht, bei uns anzufangen?
Ich werde Fußballer.
Wir brauchen solche Männer wie Sie.
Weißt du auch, wie das ist, wenn du jederzeit zu Freiwild werden kannst?
Glauben Sie, dass Sie es schaffen?
Ist eine Kampagne gegen den Hass.
Deutschland ist auf dem rechten Auge blind. Ich bin kein Ausländer. Ich bin Deutscher. Wenn du am Ende der Nahrungskette stehst, dann bleibt dir nichts anderes übrig, als zu kämpfen. Ich muss hier weg. Vielleicht könntest du mir helfen, Papiere für den Kongo zu besorgen.
I like to start with Malick actually and ask you, how does it feel to see yourself in a series, in this trailer, in the series itself? What has this experience been like for you, especially playing someone, Sam, who is very much still around and with whom you met and talked? How has this experience been?
Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief because we got so many so influential people here. At first, I want to thank everybody for coming, for your time, and the BGHRA for making this happen, making this possible. Well, how has it been? To give you a brief summary, like I work as an actor in Germany, and opportunities for people that look like us have been scarce so far, which is why I actually, when I had the kind of impulse to become an actor, my main idols were always over there with you guys. Of course, Denzel Washington. I still remember watching Training Day, and that was basically the kicker for me to try and do this. And then I wanted to come to the US. Green card stuff was tough. Then I tried in London. I failed because I had no prior real experience with acting. And then now it happened. And it is still very surreal because we've never had a piece of media like this in Germany with a German lead, which has been told by such a multi-diverse writing room and still focuses on the Black perspective at the same time. So it's still surreal. I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful to everyone who's part of this project, especially, of course, Tyron, Jörg, Chris, Soleen. Basically, everybody who's in here has made my career, and I'll be forever indebted to them. And yeah, playing Sam was a gift because he himself, I got to meet him. Gladly, he's in a different space in his life right now. He has a functioning family right now. He was very willing to share his life experiences with me. And at the same time, there was no pressure in the sense of expectation. He didn't force me to portray it in some type of way. He always left me the room to explore the character. And given that he's also an author himself, he just wrote a book about his life as well. Ich ein Sachse, it's basically me, a Saxon. He was always willing for that creative space, and he allowed me for that creative space as well.
Thank you so much. Let's turn to Tyron and Jörg. I'm not sure yet if Jörg's in a place where he can answer, so we might rely on Tyron for now. But can you tell us, how did this series begin? What's the inspiration behind it? And tell us, the story of how this came into fruition.
Well, actually, it's been a long way coming because I had met the real Sam Meffire in 2001. Back then, I was still a rap musician, and I was part of a very political rap group called Brothers Keepers. And we pointed out that Germany had a right-wing problem with like a bunch of songs that we did. And for with this band, we had planned a school tour to talk to students in the former east part of Germany, to kind of give them support, political support. And before we got to go on that tour, we had received death threats from Nazis. They said that if we would show up, then they would hang us, pretty much. Literally, not pretty much. And so we needed security. And it turned out that the real Samuel Meffire and a bunch of his crew, which we then later also in a way portray in this series, I met Sam and he told me about his story, which back then I already thought, wow, this needs to be a movie. And so 5 years after that, I was starring as an actor in Soko Leipzig, which is a detective show that Jörg Winger was the producer. And so I told Jörg, like, look, I have this great story. Let's try to make a feature out of it. And we tried in 2006, but back then Germany wasn't the place. It wasn't the time. We were told, yeah, it's a great story, but nobody wants to see a Black lead role, pretty much. And so it was quite frustrating because, I mean, the story has been a great story ever since, but we just couldn't get it off the ground. So when I came back from the States, I had the honor to work with Harry Belafonte in New York for a couple of years. But when I came back to Germany, I saw that the market had changed, due to the streaming services, and discussions had started about Black Lives Matter. And I mean, there's revolution going on. So I picked up the story again. I asked Sam if he'd be fine if we try again, this time as a series. I got my old friend Chris on board. We'd been talking about working together forever. I called Jörg again. He already had spoken to Sam because he felt it was the right time. And so the three of us decided, okay, let's go again. And then that's when we started the process again. And shortly after, we luckily found Disney Plus, who was interested in making it the first German original out of Germany for the whole world. And in America, as you know, it's on HULU. So that was like the brief story of how the whole thing came along.
Amazing, thank you. Sonia, can you have a question to ask? So I'll pass the mic to you.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Tyron, but I also would really love if Malick, if you could also answer it well. So I was really struck in the series by how the show creates these, given that the context, right, is a context of violence, right, in terms of talking about violence at the national level and the sort of really ruptures and shifts. I was really struck by how you created these spaces of home and tenderness, and in particularly tenderness and intimacy amongst the men. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the importance of that for you and what it means to create those spaces in a sort of broader context, given the significant moment, right, in which the series is emerging in. So what was it like to sort of create those scenes, and what did it mean to you? Creatively, but also perhaps even personally.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I can start. I mean, the time that we're telling, the time and the place, it just happened to be a very violent place, and so, especially when you were a Black person. So the violence, it had to be there. If we tell the story of Samuel Meffire, it's like a story that deals with violence as well. But that's not 24/7, and so I remember when we had long conversations with Samuel, about his life. And I remember one episode when he said that he was in a rowing club. And there actually was one other Black person, because he pretty much, besides his brother, which we didn't tell in the series, but he didn't grow up with other Black people around him because his father was killed. So he told us that he had another Black guy in a rowing club, but because to admit and to realize that you're Black, it kind of took you out of that dream that because you're on a sports level, you're good, your skin color is not being seen. That was the reason why he actually never approached the other Black guy, because then they both would have had to admit that they're Black people in a white society that doesn't want them. And so for us, it was very important creating the scenes that when actually Sam, our character Sam, meets other Black people, that creates like exactly what you described, that creates like an opposite situation to the violence, and then he actually learns to be himself for the first time in his life, which in the beginning he clearly has problems with. But it was so important to show those both sides, because those both sides have been there, you know, even though you had to live in a violent environment, being with your peers, it meant being safe, and it meant you could be yourself, you know, which is still a discussion we're having today in white spaces. You know, that's my take on it. Malick, what do you say?
Well, I believe everybody here is well versed in German history, but one problem that Tyron already spoke about is the fact that you don't really have yourself you don't have really opportunities to meet people that look like you in Germany. And that has to do with our colonial past, which is kind of different to the one of France or England, for example, but not in the sense that we did not do these colonial crimes. We did them. We just lost the colonies earlier. There was never a real moral overhaul where we said that we need to change or whatever. We just lost them through the World War or whatever. And because of that, you have a very small Black demographic, and the rest Tyron already said. For me as an actor, character-wise, it was always important to show that he's a three-dimensional person. What that meant for me was that, as Tyron said, we're telling a story of a very radical time. And we get to tell it because we are in better times right now. Like the developments with the streamers and Black Lives Matter, that gave us the opportunity to do the show, but the time we're telling is very radical. And then you have to, of course, create a juxtaposition to that. You have to show a certain amount of tenderness there. And especially for the scenes we did with the bouncer crew that you get to meet from episode 3 onwards, also the relationship with Alex, it was very important to show that these are men who have a certain amount of longing, especially my character, for family, for togetherness, and for unity. And my character, the real Sam Meffire, they always try to force acceptance through performance, which is why he is and always was a high performer. But then at the same time, there's an emotional hole, which of course got created through the loss of his father. And then you try to fill that void with a certain camaraderie and brotherhood that you try to create with people. And he finds that with the Black people in the show, of course, but he also finds it in the first family that he finds in the military community. But with the Black people, we all thought that it was important to show that there's a certain level of understanding that remains exclusive from time to time. Then to finally show him as a character with people who have a certain relatability to his experience is important. One thing you always have to understand also concerning the show, we're telling a moment in time in Germany that through the lens of Black people or people of color in general, because there was also a lot of violence against Asian German people, is basically on the Civil War. You have a lot of violence going on. You have these attacks on the refugee homes, and the German state always tries to water it down, tries to create a narrative of these single vigilantes / single Nazi terror acts, but they always still to this day try to deny that there is a real right-wing network carrying out these attacks. And this moment of threat without a state really fully opposing against this threat creates a longing for togetherness and unity, which is why we basically worked very hard to even extend the scenes that we had in the Black togetherness amongst the men, and where I also myself as an actor I made a decision to show that emotional side and that vulnerability, because there's so much necessary violence in the show that you have to counter at the end of the day. And yeah, that's human longing for togetherness in times of, basically, at least through the lens of Black people at that time on the brink of civil war, that was important to counter that with brotherhood in the end of the day. Yep.
Thank you.
So let's turn to Ivy. Ivy, music plays a huge role in this series, and it includes, there's a lot of songs that were written and composed specifically for the series, and by famous Black German hip hop artists and etc., including yourself. So can you talk about the role of music in the show, and how you came to it, and how your music shaped, how the show and how your experience in it sort of shaped your music for the show?
So this was my first time doing music for. Okay, that's not right. This was my first time doing music for a German show, I guess. And I felt more connected than ever because I did music for 2 movies like 10 years ago. And it was mostly like getting those songs and like performing them, and then they were released, and then they were also not part of the show. So the process of writing that song was much more intimate. There was a lot of care about choosing Black artists, like Black German artists. And also, I guess for me, the part that was new is singing in German, and actually like transporting that whole conflict and that whole like essence of that show, which is like not looking like a German, but also very much feeling like a German, I guess. Yeah, so the writing process was quite intimate. That was my first time writing in German. And then also having the music. So basically we have the score of the show, and every artist got a piece of the score to write on, basically. So that was really exciting because it really helped immersing yourself into like the story, and especially like the thought process of Sam in a certain situation. So yeah, I think the soundtrack is, in that way, it's very, very close to the show.
Well, thanks. I'll pass the mic to Elizabeth now. And I think she has a question for Soleen.
Yeah, Soleen, my question for you is, the scenes of this series are things that actually happened, but they also actually didn't happen because we are transporting something from someone else's past to a present, and it's also a piece of art, not a documentary. How was it for you to direct the scenes so that they can be your vision, but also the vision, the truth, what actually happened? How did you manage to walk that line?
Hi everyone. I think walking that line was a process for everybody was involved in this project. We started before shooting, I think 1.5 years back then, I was also in the writing process. It was very important when the first talks about the project started with Jörg and Tyron, and afterwards also with Chris, when we started the writers' room, that the director should be involved as much as possible, so that every scene and everything that is written in that story is somehow, I mean, politically and also socially, of course, very important, but to understand why it's at the end in the scripts, right? So you have to make decisions. Every piece of it, every character, every scene, every move and step you're taking within this episodes, but also because it's so special, because it's very complicated. We are telling a story who's not, how do you say it, as simple to direct, because in every episode things are changing, right? So this is a, how do you say it, a carousel for Samuel, right? So everything is changing all the time, politically, but also historically, and he is moving from world to world. So it was very complicated to write it because it's so huge, and you just get some amount of money, of course, to produce that kind of show, but it would have been much easier to do 2 seasons, probably. So the episodes were very full, you know, of changes, of characters, of plots, of things to do right. Yeah, you had to be authentic, but at the same time, because you're producing for Disney, you're also doing an entertaining show for a streamer who's like working globally, right? So you're competitive with American shows, and we knew that HULU would also screen the series. So it's a global market, right? Although you're dealing with a story of a character that roots so deeply in the German history, but also in the Afro-German history. So you committed to it in a historical way, in a political way. For me, it was more not only the artistic, you know, decision to be part of the story, but to make a difference and to rewrite German history, actually, by doing this project. So it was very complicated, but as Malick said, I think because Samuel is such a fun guy at the same time, and because he's such a open-minded, and he was always making fun of him being a new Disney princess. So it somehow gave us the freedom to be always committed to the authenticity of his story, of course, and the main point of, I mean, it's a psychological journey, right? So you have to do it right. And even though you have like this play field of all the episodes and of all the genres that are changing from episode to episode, and all the characters that were also fictionalized, of course. But at the end, the story is also very universal, and it's telling the story of a lot of Black people, not only Afro-Germans, but I think a lot of people can relate to it. Black people of color, but people of color also from, you know, European areas. So I think so the the line of, you know, it's very, how do you say it? It's very difficult to keep it entertaining, but also to keep the realness. So for me, meeting with people, also with Tyron, and talking to the actors, of course, and the work with Malick, which was very intimate, I would say, and we would always have calls at the evening, because a lot of the scenes were very harsh, you know. Sometimes I felt like a lot of actors were also re-traumatized by doing the scenes. So because it is part of their life, right? So reality was always part of it. And to fictionalize it, it always feels not right, but you have to do it because you're doing like this serious, and it's always this fight, you know, of doing something was very realistic. It's a biography of a human being who went through it, and somehow all the drama that happened in his life, it's so, how do you say it? It's so good for the story, right? So it is sometimes, how do you say it? It is sometimes, it doesn't feel right doing it, fictionalizing it. But at the same time, I felt at one point there's also always a core, a political, a humanistic core. And when you get attached to it and when you feel it, when you kind of believe in it, and when you see, I mean, after the show came out, so many people are contacting Malick. I think Tyron is getting a lot of messages, right? Everybody was involved in that story. So everybody is sharing their stories, you know, and seeing themselves, unfortunately, in the story of Samuel Meffire. So I feel like we did something right because we just stick to the universal point of, as Malick said, searching for a home, but also dealing with trauma. And yeah, the loss of parents, actually, the loss of a childhood, the loss of having a decent human life, right? And being on the run and fighting all the time, and basically being in the war, not only with the outside of Nazi Germany in the 90s, but with yourself, because you don't know how to deal with peace. So for me, it was always a psychological journey that I mostly felt connected to. And I think when you stick to that, you kind of cannot do it wrong. Although we have like this playfield of fiction, but at the end, it's a human being with a trauma and a psychological journey through that fictionalization of a story. So this is like my brief, not very short answer to that question. But yeah, you see, very complex, but we tried our best.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to some of the questions that our audience is asking too. And so Helga Thorsen, who is a colleague of ours in German Studies, asked, how did you make decisions about what actual people, besides the real Sam, to depict, such as the decision to include a depiction of Mayayim, for example? And Chris, I noticed that you're typing an answer, but maybe this is a good time for you to speak up.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just answering that because particularly with Mayayim, I remember that was, for me, it was a matter of the heart because I admire her greatly as a poet, and she's helped me understand a lot of things when I was first encountered her work back when she was with us, and there were readings and I was following a lot of that through a lot of, you know, the way the people I was with and around. I believe Tyron and I were already friends back then. So it just to be able to, you know, she's people are aware of her, but unfortunately it's still sort of a small number of people that are aware of her today, I believe, and we really wanted to use the spotlight that a series like this can give, the massive Disney spotlight, to say, hey, maybe we can get some editions of her work done. Maybe more people, a wider audience of today will see. Because amazingly, not only did she help coin the term Afro-German that has become, you know, obviously a core of identity, but she also in so many ways said a lot of the things that long after her sadly early passing became so prominent in the discussion. She's already brought a lot of those things to light in her writings. And yeah, so we're just grateful that we were able to share her light with the world once again.
And to what extent, I guess I'm just not sure about this, are other characters in the show based on real people?
Yes, the Minister of Interior of Saxony is a true character, and when it comes to pretty much everyone else, many people are inspired by real life characters, but that's where, when you're telling true stories, you get into a bit of a legal issue. So we renamed most of the other people. Is there anybody that has their real name in the show, Tyron, that I'm forgetting? No, right? Yeah, so it's really the only people that are actual are Mayayim and the Minister of Interior, Mr. Eggert.
Okay, interesting.
Who's also still with us and who watched the show and is very supportive of it, actually. Yeah.
Oh, wow, good.
Yeah.
So this question comes from Kavina King, who's actually the vice president of the BGHRA. And she asks, so Bronwyn Opako, who we talked to, I think, last year in a conversation, her film Dreckfresser is about Sam's life. So how much of an influence did it play in this new production about Sam? And maybe that's, I'm not sure if that might be a question for Soleen or Tyron.
Well, it didn't really impact the production of the series, because we are telling a time period actually before Samuel went to jail, and the documentary that Branwen did a long time ago, she visited him in jail, and but back then Samuel, he was at a very different point. So if you guys interested, the Branwen's film, I believe you can watch it on YouTube. It's called Dreckfresser, which means dirt eater. And Samuel seems to be like a very different person back then. And now he had much more time to reflect also what had happened in his life, and I think for us it was, I think it was good for him that Sam had some time, to also look at his life from a different perspective. What we did do, we also, if you go on the extras on the show, there's a documentary, and we had contacted Branwen whether she'd be interested in directing a new documentary. But then Branwen pretty much let us know that for her, she already told her story as she saw it, and she wasn't so much into telling it again. But we were in contact with her about collaborating on the documentary.
Also, I know that when we would talk to actors or crew members, I think the documentary the link was always attached to also the presentation, the booklet, so everybody somehow watched the documentary, because it was, besides the TV channels and interviews with Samuel, I think it was very important because his book wasn't out yet, to see and hear him talk in his words. We are doing a show. I mean, Tyron was, Jörg and Chris were in direct contact with him, but I think for everybody else to get a brief moment, brief feeling, for people who didn't know anything about Samuel, I think it was a great archive of his very cruel point of his life where he was, and where I think Brennan did a great job of doing this documentary. I still remember watching it for the first time, and I felt like it gave me the right feeling for the series also. I feel like I could listen to Samuel telling his story, and that was very important. So we attached the link always when we would try to get people on board.
Yeah, as an actor, I can just add maybe it was very, because you look at mannerisms and you look at the person, the character that you get to portray. And I still remember that I always had to then extrapolate from watching Dreckfresser, where, as Tyron said, Sam is in a different space compared to the show that we're telling. Dreckfresser is, I believe they did Dreckfresser 5 or 6 years into his incarceration. And he had already done a lot of therapy, a lot of work with the inner selves, working on his trauma. So you basically get to see a really reflecting version of Samuel speaking in Dreckfresser. But you still, as an actor, you see the speech patterns, you see the influence his military or police career has on his mannerisms of speaking and so forth. But I then had to extrapolate that into the same individual going through the fire. And of course, it's one thing that the real minister, Heinz Eggert, always said, is that the show is very much based in the emotional truth of Samuel Meffire. And we have these three big plot lines: being Black in Germany, being an GDR citizen in Western Germany, and the third thing is, of course, the loss of his father. These are like the three big plot lines. And then Dreckfresser helped me to see his perspective, also to see in Dreckfresser how he talks about the past compared to his mother talking about the past, who also sadly abused him because she was in a very tight or tough situation. And yeah, but then of course, as I already said, the real Samuel also was very, very open and vulnerable with me. And I actually had the book. I had the raw version of the book while we were shooting the show. He entrusted me with it. And yeah, so I had like extra perspective, but I always still had to extrapolate, because he is now, if you think about the three versions of Samuel, you have the one in the fire, which is basically the version that we tell in the story in our series, Sam, A SAXON. Then you have Samuel from Dreckfresser, 5 years of therapy and reflection on what happened and what went wrong. And then, of course, you have the great man of today who has a very stable home life. And I got to watch these two older versions of Samuel, but then I had to go, as the name of Brenwan's documentary is, I had to go into the dirt and eat it. So yeah, that was basically always this weird equation there. But I still think, of course, it was important, but it was not very comparable, like not totally, but yeah. That extrapolation always had to happen, but gladly, Chris, Jörg, Soleen, Tyron, everybody in the writer's room already, they did great work, and I just had to like add to it, you know.
Elizabeth has another question.
It should be said also, sorry, this is Jörg, I'm still in traffic, but it should be said that the book that Samuel wrote, his autobiography, is going to be published in English. And so we'll be able to send you a link to the book in its English publication pretty soon.
Great. That makes a lot of sense to, I mean, yeah, of course. Wonderful. Elizabeth.
Yeah, this is a question for everyone, cast and writers and directors. How much were you aware of the historical that this was a game changer, that what was being created was going to change the game for telling Black people's stories, the stories of people of color in Germany? How aware, while you were doing it, were you, and how did that move you? I mean, I ask this question because just seeing this incredibly beautiful cast and remembering the feeling of, it didn't feel like any other set I'd ever been on. And I wonder, was I just being emotional, or was this like really clear? I know that I've had conversations with Tyron like 25 years ago about not seeing other people of color in what we were doing. And unfortunately, you know, like those conversations 25 years ago are still valid. And yeah, how did you know what it was that you were creating altogether?
Well, Elizabeth, actually it was 33 years ago when we had those conversations, because back in the days I remember I was 17. We were in a theater play together in Düsseldorf, and Elizabeth kind of protected me from the theater world a little bit because I was like in over my head. I had no idea what I was getting into. I don't even want to speak too long. I just want to tell you like one short situation that I remember, and it wasn't even Disney, but it was in the process that we already had worked up the new launch of Sam as a series. At a certain point, I had received the first email from Netflix. And I remember I was in the gym, like with my buddies trying to be tough because we were boxing and everything. But when I received that email from Netflix, it just hinted that there might be a slight chance that we get to tell our story. I was tearing up because I felt, okay, this could be a very important moment in time. Then it did still take more time. You know, we ended up not working with Netflix. We ended up working with Disney. But I think in the casting, you know, when maybe Malick wants to speak about it, when we met, like I saw Malick at a party and I approached him. I think we all felt that if this would actually work out, it could be something of a game changer. But that still remains to be seen how much it really changes the game, you know? But I think we felt that there's like a lot in it. Malick.
Yeah, I got a call incoming because of my birthday and stuff. So, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, for me, it was painfully obvious by the way that this project came about. I met Tyron as an older Black actor on a Black event. I just came up to him, giving him like the elder statesman respect in the sense of, I know you've been working hard for representation in Germany, and I just want to give you your flowers. And then I was on my heels turning around, and then he basically said, wait, hold up. You basically look like the reincarnation of a man's life story that I was trying to tell for a long time with Jörg Winger and Chris Zilber. You need to come to casting. I had you open once. You don't have a show reel yet. And I told him I don't have a show reel because all the parts that they offer me are basically stereotypes, and I'm not doing that. I'm remaining in theater. Theater was more progressive at that time. And well, I'm gonna go to the casting, thank you very much. And then I opened the internet, and when you put in Sam Meffire, that was 2019, 2.5 years before we started shooting, I got like shocked when I saw that man. Because, you know, for some white people, Black people look alike, but we actually do look alike. Like, it's not a fake resemblance, it's a real crazy resemblance. Our stories have these weird parallels, and I don't want to get too like mystical here, but from that point on, I felt like, and I do believe like my job, especially, it has to do some way with a certain, illusion of grandeur, I guess. And when I saw Samuel in the context of the casting and how it came about, I felt a certain moment of anointment. I felt like this was meant to happen and I was meant to do it. And I knew, now that I'm talking to you guys overseas in the US, this was basically the show that never happened until now, which is why I made my first tries to become an actor in a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to do it, meeting Jörg, who has such an excellent track record of inclusion, he's been doing inclusive storytelling for a long time. Basically, Jörg and Tyron have a working relationship that dates back 20 years almost now. Seeing Chris Zilber, a white East German man with Black children as well, right? Meeting Soleen Yusef, a Kurdish director giant, I felt like this is a very weird alignment of timelines happening. And I all of a sudden felt like I now am the guy to deliver proof of concept with these warriors behind me that good stories are universal. If you put a Black man there, if you put a trans person there, if you put an older woman there, if it's good, it's good. And that type of awareness is still lacking in the German media market. They have this very narrow idea of what it is to be interesting, of what it is to be worthwhile, of what it is to be three-dimensionally necessary. And that vision always excluded Black people in Germany, especially. Like our 10-15% migrant population that is like dominating the working class are mainly Turkish, Arabic people who migrated to rebuild Germany after the Second World War. There is a certain like exclusion of Blackness happening. And I knew when we did that show that I'm definitely coming guns blazing to end that. I want to add Blackness to the full value German narrative, which it has always been a part of. If I look at you beautiful people here who come from the generation before me, whose shoulders I now stand on. But definitely there was a crazy feeling of anointment, which basically gave me limitless energy. I did not feel that this was like a weird combination of coincidence. I don't believe in that. I have a very different faith system, and that carried me through the show. And my goal was always to add German life as a full value narrative onto the German media market. And through that proof of concept, I then want to influence in the media market to expand its perception of what is worthy life. Yeah. Onto whoever, Soleen or Jörg or Chris, whoever. But I definitely always felt that this was meant to be. When I first saw Sam Meffire's face, where I'm from, like I'm from the Ivory Coast. I come from a long line of history over there. I'm lucky enough to have that history. All the Black people here, we need to cross that ocean, that triangle. US, EU, Africa, we need to close that gap. You know, the year of return, Ghana, all these things, which is why I'm super emotional and happy to speak here. But the truth lies in the connection of the Afro diaspora. I had Afro diaspora knowledge of my roots and my background. And where I'm from, we believe in reincarnation. And the person that you come back as doesn't necessarily have to be dead yet. If you look at Samuel and you look at myself, it is very eerie. That's all I'm going to say. If you look at Samuel's core values and my core values, it becomes even more eerie. Because of course, this is a Black show, but Samuel and myself, we're Germans first, in the sense of I'm a proud Afro-German, and we couldn't have done this great ass piece of work, piece of art, without our German brothers and sisters like Jörg, like Chris, like Soleen. This show has a Black lead and it is a Black narrative. But the beautiful thing about this show is that for the first time, something happened here which never happened before. Many different demographic groups that built the German narrative or built the German society came together. And through Jörg's craftsmanship, to Tyron's relentlessness and work effort, and also to Chris's craftsmanship on the penmanship, because the script has to get sold, right? And then passing it to a great young director like Soleen, who then works with it, works on it with a Black actor, which is now me. That is a very special alignment of timing. That's all I'm gonna say. And for me, to be very direct with it, I felt anointed from the moment I saw Samuel, and I was like, no, I'm going to get the part. That is clear. And then it became like a 2-year tug of war if it would get made. And I got cast in 2019, but then Black Lives Matter hadn't happened yet. So the German media market was still lazy. But after Black Lives Matter, now finally the anti-Black racism discussion arrived in Germany. And then also from a media perspective, we finally had the streamers here who had hunger for a more diverse German story. But please remember, all these German state-funded channels rejected the show. So all this timing, there's too much coincidence happening here for me to believe it's a coincidence. So I felt productive pressure. Let me say this, productive pressure.
There was actually one German national channel who was interested, but they just moved too slow.
Yeah.
In this case.
Okay. But well,
and had no money, probably, right? Yeah. It's like, you have €2, do your show. Yeah, it's very important, but we have no money for these kind of shows. It's just like, I mean, I have to add that, it's a very political decision. It's not only diversity has been a huge subject, of course, also in Germany, but it's really very superficial. So for me, Sam a SAXON was a project that started already like years before, recreating and rewriting history. So it's not just about creating stories of nowadays, themes that are important, of course, for the society and the political movements here, but I think it's very important to go back and rewrite the things that have been done wrong. So this was the most important thing for me when started, because Jörg and I did Deutschland 89 together, who is dealing with the fall of the Berlin Wall. So realizing that it's not just it's a big part of these stories that have been told like for years and decades. I mean, the Second World War and also our huge historical themes here. Also, the fall of the wall. I don't know how many shows and films and has been, and theater shows have been done about it, but none of it has been with the lead Afro-German character who is part of the DDR socially, being socialized there and born there, and it's part of the DDR history. So this is something very important to understand, that the core of the show was very loyal to its, to its story, to the story of telling a German story from a different perspective. Because nowadays I read a lot of, concept booklets, I mean, scripts, episodes of films, first Bibles and so on. And I always feel like they are putting diverse characters in it just because it's mundane and it's like, it feels like you have to do it, otherwise it's politically not correct. But when you read the characters, they lack character, they lack history, they lack like a connection to the story of the whole, serious show, or maybe the theme they want to tell. So it was it was completely different when we started to do Sam a SAXON, because also the writers' room was beautiful. I mean, I had never had such a good, profound experience, because it was not only about working on a show to be created, to, deliver for Disney. It was like going to seminars, sitting there and getting something out of it, not only for the show, but for your life, meeting people and then realizing to an extent how your horizon has been expanded, because it was not only about the show, it was including people and creating a space where everybody can tell their stories. And I was so appreciating all the, developing of it, and everybody who was involved, I think, was deeply connected to Sam a SAXON, because they felt included in all kind of ways, and seen. And this is like something, it's lacking very much so in the German industry. And besides, as I said in the beginning, I think money, productional wise, is very important. I mean, we just have to be realistic with it, right? So if you want to change something, you have to give the right producers the big amount of money to create shows like this and to make a difference. So this is something that, it's a lot of blah, blah, but there's not much changing. But maybe a side character who's like, yeah. But we are keeping.
And there's still a lot of room for change, huh? So
Of course.
this is just one of the first steps. We're not there yet.
Yeah, technically one thing, like there's a show right now who was basically a bit of a competitor. I'm gonna just give you an example how diversity works in Germany at times. They often, technically, dramaturgically, they put it in a subplot. And there's a show, it's called Luden. And in Luden, there's one black person. That black person is also the trans person. That trans person is also homosexual. that homosexual Black trans person is fully irrelevant to the main plot, fully irrelevant. They just basically have to put him in there to cover diversity, but there's no real interest of developing him as a character. And that is something where diversity, which now finally sort of arrived in Germany, then becomes quite performative. Just to give you one example, which was the great difference in this show, where we had diversity not only in front of the camera, but maybe even more importantly so behind the camera, where different people were adding to that narrative that then got created.
And I think it all basically culminated in this one premiere that we had set up in the biggest movie theater in Berlin, in East Berlin. I mean, it was the right place for it, where we had 600 people. I think for many Black Germans I spoke to, was the biggest experience and the biggest basically Black event they had been to, and the emotion that I think that erupted before the show when Samuel was on stage, and then after the show when Malick was basically getting up to the stage. It was the most emotional premiere I have ever attended in my life. And you could basically, that pouring out of emotion was so impressive and touching. And I think it transcended. It was the Black community, but it was also the white people in the audience who felt, even the liberal white ones who felt that the series or watching the series has changed their perception of what it's like to be Black in Germany.
Thank you all for all of that. I wanted to ask a question, and I wish Ivy was still here, but luckily we have Elizabeth, also, who played obviously a woman in the show. Claire Scott asks, so similar to Kavina's previous point, one of her favorite moments, and mine too, actually, in the series is when the other women step in to protect Jenny from unwanted advances on the dance floor. So their approach to intervening is significantly different from the group of men. Could you speak to the different strategies surrounding conflict in the fight for social justice as depicted in the show? And I would even expand that to also what the gender dynamics of those various plot points are. And that's an open question to anyone.
I think early in the writers' room, we decided that we want an alternative way to protest the situation, which was, as Tyron and Malick and everybody else has described, as a country on the edge of a civil war. It's one of the few things that make me really sad about this show, is that we had a much more extensive storyline for the three women and their protests. There were sit-ins. There was a whole storyline about how they deal with the lawyer, Ivy's employer, basically, and how they deal with that kind of racism, and how they do basically what the show has been trying to do for Germany. And we had more money than your average German show, but we were still under enormous pressure of budget and time, so we had to really reduce that storyline quite a bit, and that's very sad. But for us, it was very important to show alternative ways to rebel, or to make a difference, or to make yourself heard.
And I think the inspiration came from all the women in the writers' room, right? So they were involved from the beginning on, because it's so deeply, the story is like moving with somewhere, right? So it's very difficult to create a series that is so attached to this character and being with him, and he's very ambivalent. So you have to keep him so much and to give him so much time, right? But it was also very important, as Jörg said, to create a different part of activism who took place in East Germany, not only East Germany, but in Berlin, for example, also general. I know the first talks that we had, beginning with Maya Ayim and creating an homage to her, but also the influence that Audre Lorde had on the activist groups, and when also the started to Schwarze Deutsche Initiative, so the Afro-German initiative, who would start like not being created, and also these kinds of different groups that started to somehow create this safe spaces, of course, starting. But of course, because as Jörg tried to, create the process of developing the story, where we had so much ideas, as I said at the beginning. I think 2 seasons would have been great for all the things that we wanted to share, and all the people that were part of the writers' room that shared with us. And I feel like for Samuel, not only for Samuel, but all the characters that has been written, I feel like also the crew, the crew around him. There is one scene where everybody's talking about their fathers, right? And then there is the AG Farbe, where Malick or Samuel is meeting the Black community for the first time. And I feel like there are some words, they are like different worlds, like being open. But because you're forced to be attached to Samuel, you feel like you have to move forward with the plot, right? But at the same time, you just want to stay there and meet all the people and all the stories. And I feel like maybe, or my hope is that maybe after watching A SAXON, people would get the inspiration, or maybe like realize, okay, there are like hundreds of characters being at the AG Farbe meeting, and everyone of them has the story to tell. So this was actually, the feeling that I had being in the writer's room. It felt like just the beginning. I don't know how you, it felt like just the beginning, and not being able to tell all of it,
I'd like to underline what Soleen said about the writer's room, because I think that might be also interesting to the listeners. We really made sure that the writer's room is as diverse as it could be, in the sense that half of the writer's room was female, the other half was male, half was Black, the other half was white, half was from East Germany, the other half was from the West. And because we had those so many different perspectives in the writer's room, it meant that we had a lot of discussions, but also we had then so many different perspectives that then later we could weave them into like a very like multi-dimensional story. And if it wouldn't have been for it, just like if I take myself, I would have liked to tell the story a little more grimy sometimes, much more from a male perspective. But then we had pushback in the writer's room, which I'm happy about, saying like, no, you have to add different perspectives. And that's at the end of the day how then also the story of the females grew and became more important, and hence it became more 3-dimensional story, because not everybody was alike at the time, not everybody had the same strategy.
Right, and this is actually, it kind of hints at something that, coming from a writer's perspective, something that the Writers Guild strike here in the US, where I happen to live, is about, mainly about, because writers' rooms from an industry perspective, right? Studios and networks say, we have a story, we've all agreed on it, now let's get it written as effectively, cost-effectively, and quickly as possible, basically. Whereas we, especially when we're telling a story that honors the, real life authenticity, we want to tell the story in a way that is as respectful, as loving, as authentic as possible. For that, you need large writers' rooms, and you need time. You need a number of voices, and it's not as much about, is everyone going to eventually be actually penning scripts. It's about creating a space where everyone's voice is heard. And that was really unique for this project. We're all very grateful for that.
The question.
Yes, I have a question. And actually, my question is again for Elizabeth. Elizabeth, and I'm coming from the perspective of a person of a different generation than most of the other actors, in as well as being a woman. So I would like to know from you, having been in Germany all these years and seen the different changes, what did it feel like to you to be in there and to be the mom, you know? Because actually, in a sense, because you've already told us that you've known Tyron forever. So in a way, you were kind of like the auntie mom in the place and your role was small, but what did that feel like to you to be a part of it?
Well, the first thing I remember feeling is very, very grateful to be able to be a part of it. And then just seeing all these beautiful young actors of color. And it just sort of, I thought it was worth it to try. When I came to Germany, I came to Germany in 1974. And trying to make my way, of course, my way at that time had to be the way of trying to integrate into the theater system that was there and into the theater idea. But every now and then I was able to speak with some directors and say, you know, when they said, well, you can't really work it here in the theater on a regular basis because the roles for you don't exist. And I remember having these conversations about theater not being reality, so roles existed. But these struggles, you know, to, as a Black woman in theater, to be able to have a place, and there were not so many people around me at that time. And when I was like on the set of Sam, I just thought, yeah, it was worth trying because this younger generation is going places that we couldn't go, you know, and they're really going. And I am very proud of all of these younger people. I mean, for me, everybody's younger, yeah. Yeah, like I actually really feel like an auntie or mom. You know, my daughter said, my mom is everybody's mom. And I actually really feel like that. I want to protect the younger people. I want to be there if they have questions or if things get too much or get overwhelming. Like, yeah, this is the feeling I had and the feeling I have. I'm so happy to see this happening. I am so happy to see people like Malick and like Tyron and like Soleen. And I'm so happy that there are people like Jörg and Chris who get it, you know, who don't do this, oh, well, we'll put a person of color in there just because we'll put a person of color in there and it doesn't have to do with anything. I'm so happy that people are really getting it and getting, there's a kind of solidarity. It's beyond a political solidarity. It's a solidarity on the level of our basic humanity when we work like this together. And if anything is transformative, that's the thing that's transformative, is to bring this, the solidarity of the heart into this industry. And if it's people of color who are going to do that, so be it. We will do it. Yeah, so that's what it feels like.
From Roberta, in the Q&A, Afro-Germans are multinational. What has the response been to the series from Afro-Germans in other countries? Well, we can speak to the United States context, but maybe beyond that, who may not necessarily self-identify as Afro-German.
Maybe I can jump in here because I had the experience of working. I don't know. I don't know if I fully understand, but I'll give maybe a different answer. But I think it will get to the same core of the question. I don't know if it was only for Afro-Germans who live in other countries. I cannot speak to that because I haven't spoken to Afro-Germans from France, but I've spoken to Black people from France. And one very visceral experience I can share is from shooting for episode 7 in South Africa. Because our German colonial past is so very incomparable to the other countries, we did the same crimes, but not for the same amount of time, which is why Black perspective in Germany is always missing. I always felt that this might be a bit niche. This might be a bit hard to connect to, but then I got to meet the South African Black actors through the rehearsals and everything. And the way that they opened up to the show was very mind-boggling to me, because I always dreaded ending the show in South Africa. Our last bit of shooting was in South Africa, and I always complained to Jörg and Tyron. I was like, oh, why do we have to close in South Africa? I will be there with some mercenaries who don't really give a damn about the show. I want to be with my core team. I want to be with the core German team who made this possible. But then when I got to South Africa, I couldn't have been more wrong. And they were very much attached to the questions of identity. Identity in the sense of from oneself, but also from the outer world onto oneself, right? They were very in tune with that. We had crazy conversation with Thabo Malema, who plays Uncle Johnny, with Honse, who plays the Auntie Afia. And then I really understood that this, I'm gonna say, Black identity struggle within a white-dominated society was much more universal than I could have imagined. And also when I talk to friends I have from France, they really connect. I get a lot of messages from, lately I got some messages from Black people in Brazil. I don't know if it's kind of like found a little bit of a need or maybe fan base or whatever in Brazil, but they are also of course, fighting similar problems. If you look at the favelas and how power is distributed in that society. So I can say from a diaspora perspective, I got many very encouraging messages and or reactions, but I hope it gets to the core of the question. People do feel a much more stronger connection to the story than what I could have imagined. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. There are a lot of compliments coming to all of you in the Q&A. I wanted to take a moment to read some of them. So Malick is an amazing actor. He portrayed his character so beautifully to where we actually felt the pain and pulls from different directions. This is from Petra. I grew up in West Germany to Trinidadian parents, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. And let's see, this is from Anonymous. This is a very powerful series. I especially was moved by Malick's performance. Malick, oh, we kind of addressed that already. From Jeanette, having lived in the States, Jeanette is from East Germany and is identifies also as a Black German. Her dad is from Cameroon, and having grown up and being exposed to a large Black German community in East and West Berlin, Sam's story reminded me a lot of the stories I heard from friends. It was saddening for me to see how life for a Black German could be so different from what I experienced. Having lived in the States for the past 28 years, owns a very good bakery in Indianapolis. It is good to see that more Black Germans are seen on TV. Still not enough, and also are working behind the scenes in different positions. And and people are just overjoyed by this wonderful series. A great achievement, says Michael. So with that, I wondered if everyone might say, a few last words, a few closing statements, anything that you sort of wanted to talk about, but we didn't get to, or anything that comes to mind. Maybe we can begin with Soleen.
I was typing an answer to a question about Audre Lorde. I feel so lucky to really be here and to talk about all of this, and I just still feel that we are, when it comes to German TV developments, we are still in the beginning, but I think Sam SAXON was a huge step forward. And still, it feels like just being from the percentage of representation, it feels like just a big step, elephant step for all of, Black people of color and people of color. But when it comes to economically speaking, to the shows and still the amount of shows that are being produced, I still feel like there is a lot more that has to be done. We are working on it, and it's a huge example of how the things should be done. And I feel privileged to have been part of it and to gain so much experience, and so many people, especially who are now part of my life and part of the journey that I'm taking as a filmmaker. So it's not only about the product, I think, but or the show that at the end is being created, but the ways that things are made. And I think that's a huge difference when it comes to shows. And I think everyone who's here and has been fighting the fight for Sam SAXON since 20 years, but also the last 2 years maybe, and also moving forward to creating a lot of other stories based on these fights, are still fighting fights, and it's not easy. It never has been easy, but there are doors that has been opened, and I think we are able to, go through them and then make differences, hopefully, and let's see what's possible. That's what I can say. So thank you very much for inviting us and having this talk. And
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Don't want to put pressure.
Well, since the fight is going on, one thing that I would like to say in the name of all us filmmakers, if you want to do something to support, because there's so much more to do, if you've watched and liked the series, if you could leave a comment on IMDb, a positive review, as well as Rotten Tomatoes, it really helps, because guess what? There are haters of the work that we do. And so positive feedback really helps the show to get seen, and more of these kind of things to get produced.
Yeah, I'm super happy that we're in a position of having been able to make that show. But it's really, it's like Soleen said, it might be for us it's a big step, but on a broader scale, it's still a small step. You know, politically, it's like times are shaky. You know, in Germany, I don't know if you guys realized, but Europe has just decided on new laws, kind of sealing off the borders of Europe, allowing for refugees to be put in detention camps and stuff like that. You know, so it's not good times, and I think it's our duty as storytellers to also put stories in the world that give alternative ideas of how we can live together, you know. And for that, I think we need more people that have been not able to tell their stories, need to get in positions where they can tell their stories, because you know the story of the hunt, until the lions tell the story, you know, the stories of the hunt have always glorified the hunter. You know, we shall not forget. And that's not just being able to tell stories, but it also means getting the capital to tell the stories, because like to create movies, to create series, you need a lot of money. And as long as we still live in capitalism, whoever has the capital gets to decide, you know, what is being told and what not. So this is just really a very humble beginning. And I think we need to tell more of our stories and find ways to just, you know, live together in peace and like save the planet and like do that in a graceful way. That's my finishing words. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. Jörg, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's no. I just want to say I'm incredibly thankful to Rosemary and her team and you guys who made this conversation possible, because we always start from the beginning that even though it's a German show and a very specific German regional show, it has some universal meaning. And I think every conversation we can have across the pond is helping to move, you know, and reach the minds and hearts of more people. And storytelling is, I think, a very important weapon in our fight to create more empathy and understanding, and to just have a more humane world, you know. And a lot of this we can use right now in times of crisis. So I'm very thankful, and I very much look forward to our tour in the fall and to all the conversations. It makes me very happy to, you know, I mean, we haven't seen each other in a few weeks, our entire team here, and it reminds me of the, you know, fantastic experience that was to work together on this amazing show. So thank you.
Thank you. And Malick?
Yeah, first and foremost, I can only join in my appreciation and my thanks to you guys for setting this great conversation up. I'd like to give maybe a three-part answer, or two or three-part answer. The first part I already said. Remember this, Africa, right? The pond, we have to cross this pond. This diaspora has to more and more find each other, whether it is now this European and American connection, whether it is the connection from us down south to the origin, to the motherland. It is very, very important. Secondly, I can only agree with Tyron. We're currently in certain bubbles, at least, because I think it's Sonia, right, who was in Miami right now, in Florida. We see what DeSantis is doing, right? We all know what he's doing, right? So let's be very aware that even though we get to tell this, or we got to tell the story because certain finally arrived in society, that is not the majority opinion in society. Berlin is a bubble. California is a bubble. The middle of America is a very different playing field, right? Always remember that. And also remember that we are currently living, if you think geopolitically, fascism is on the rise. Like nationalist thoughts are on the rise. I remember like 10, 15 years ago, we were joking about Austria. We were joking about Trump. he wants to get elected. How? This is so funny. I remember that White House correspondence didn't Obama making jokes. And now where are we today? Abortion rights getting deleted, books are getting burned. The time that allows us to tell these stories is not guaranteed. Let's keep a certain amount of awareness for that. And lastly, I can only thank the people who, made the show. You've all met them today. I want to give a great, even though they are not here with us, appreciation and thank you to the team behind me, the crew that we did the show with. Of course, I want to thank Disney as well for having the guts to do this. And now that we are here, of course, I look forward to maybe meeting you guys as well when we get to do this tour. But for everyone who's out there who might have an interest in storytelling, stay hungry. Like these times that we are now enjoying, maybe if you look at a certain pendulum, already on the swing back towards a more conservative, mainstream opinion, I might say. So I'm very grateful we got to do this, but we have to stay diligent, we have to stay fighting, and this is our small contribution to a much larger fight. And let's try to keep the momentum going. And thank you as well for everyone who takes the time out their day, as Chris said, to maybe then, word of mouth is strong. Recommend the show to whoever you know. Give your time, these 2-3 minutes, to leave a recommendation on IMDb. It is highly appreciated. What he said is very true. This show also has enemies. Like if you look at the trailers, there are like 2 sets of trailers. There's the trailer that Disney posted, which kind of exists in that progressive left bubble. And then there's a trailer that they marketed, which they basically pushed into everybody's algorithm. The comments underneath the 2 trailers are totally incomparable, because one is the realistic German opinion and the other one is the left bubble, which we all are very privileged to work in. But all I'm gonna say, or what I'm gonna close with is stay weary, and we are very grateful. I'm very blessed to have made this show. As Elizabeth already said, these are the greatest times they have ever existed. But for myself, I would try to keep the resilience of the brothers and sisters that came before me, so that progress does not stop.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, as our bridge between the show and the BGHRA, I'd like to give you, the platform.
There's so much that's been said, and there's so much, the feelings of, and not just the feelings, the actions of all the people of this team, all the people of both teams go so much farther and so much beyond what we could say in this short time. I see that everybody's working on the same thing. We are all fighting for opening more doors for people coming after us to go through. And each of us is working on that in a different way. But it's so encouraging to see how there's one spirit behind this, is to open up, open up, open up. It's, this spirit that, like Malick does it as an actor, and Tyron, you're doing it as a producer and writer, and Soleen, you're doing it as a director, and Chris, you're doing it as a writer, and Jörg, you're doing it as a producer, and we're all doing the same thing. We're all fighting for the same thing. And I think my privilege is to be able to touch both worlds here, and because I'm able to touch both worlds, I get to look deeper and look within what we're doing. The BGHRA and this film cast and crew, we're sort of bound together. Like, we won't see each other every day or every week or every month, but to know that we're all there makes me feel strong for times when things get rough. And as this story shows, things get rough. But to know that everybody's there, everybody's fighting for the same thing in their own way, that's like something we can take with us all the time, you know? That's something I can keep from an afternoon like this afternoon. And it keeps me strong. So I guess what I really want to say is thank you. Keep going. Thank you. I've got your back as much as I can. Thank you.
Well, in closing, I'd like to say many thanks again to our esteemed guests for allowing us the privilege of hosting this most memorable discussion. And of course, a big thanks to my BGHRA executive team. As I noted earlier, we are planning an in-person university tour beginning on the East Coast, tentatively scheduled for mid to late September. Should you have any interest in hosting members of the cast and production team of Sam, A SAXON at your institution, we cordially invite you to reach out to us at info@bghra.org. Meanwhile, today's recording will soon be on our YouTube channel at Black Germans. So please subscribe and turn on the notifications so you'll be notified as new videos appear. Visit our website at bghra.org and follow us at Black Germans on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for announcements about future events and, of course, the upcoming tour. We hope that you've enjoyed today's fabulous conversation as much as we have. And until next time, once again, we thank you for your time and attention.